Hello, everybody. Really excited to be here. And my talk today is going to focus on how to integrate AI into a marketing team's workflow. And like Mehmet said, my name is Alisa Scharf. I'm the VP of SEO and Generative AI at Seer Interactive. So before I get into the talk, I just wanted to set the stage and explain what we do at Seer. Some of you may be familiar with Seer. If you are, you've probably seen our CEO and founder, Will Reynolds, speaking. So our mission at Seer, in a phrase, is to unlock potential. We are a transformational digital consultancy. We leverage data, we leverage technology, and we leverage AI to invent new ways to approach SEO, paid media, analytics, and creative services. And you could always say that this space is an ever-changing digital landscape. The last 18 months, especially, have seen so much change. It has been such an exciting time and a really transformational time. And so that's what my speech today is going to cover. So what do we do at Seer? And this is not to do a sales pitch, but I want to set the stage for the different types of work we do at Seer. So of course we do search engine optimization. That's what we're most well known for. We also do paid media, we do analytics and insights, we do creative services, and we do conversion rate optimization. And so one of again what I was mentioning before, this really transformational time was sparked by generative AI, and we believe this is the biggest change to our industry in the last decade at least. And it's changing our industry specifically in really interesting ways. And we think about it in two categories. There's changes to how we search, and as consumers, I'm not limited to Google anymore for good search results. I can go to Chat GPT, I can go to Perplexity, and the interest in these new platforms is evolving. Also, there's a lot of changes to how we work. So if you work in any type of knowledge work, any type of sales and marketing, you know that your day to day has really been transformed. And a lot of our go to tools, like things like Sheets or Excel or Google Workspace, that's really been complemented very nicely by generative AI. But it's also new. It's really difficult to tell how exactly do you integrate that into your team's workflow. So today I'm going to focus entirely on the second category here and talk a lot about what we've been doing at Seer in the past year and the changes we've made to how we work. So my overall goal for this section today, I want you all to be able to walk away with an understanding of the investments required to compete with the next generation of marketers. And the key word here is investments, because everyone wants a big ROI on generative AI. You go on LinkedIn and it's like, wow, everything is so easy to do now with AI, but it takes investments. It takes real investments. And so that's what we're going to cover today. So this is Sam Altman, as many of you may recognize, and he said something really, really compelling in the last year. He said, and I quote, 95% of what marketers use agencies, strategists, and creative professionals for today will easily, nearly instantly, and at almost no cost be handled by the AI. So if you work at an agency, or if you're a strategist, if you're a creative professional, and you heard this quote, I think you do a pretty big gulp initially, right? It's like, wow, that's something else. That's pretty significant. And so a lot of us kind of had this reaction of like, Sam, you don't know our space. You don't know how smart we are. You don't know how smart our teams are, the nuance of all of this. At first, there's a lot of dismissal. We don't believe it. But there's a lot of really legitimate sources backing him up and saying, no, this is really transformative. So this is a study done by McKinsey, and they were looking at what business functions are adopting generative AI most. And you can see at the very top of the list is marketing and sales, followed by product and service development and IT. That falls in a lot of the categories that you and I work in today. So we know a lot of people in our space are using these tools. And that means we need to be using them too, most likely, unless you believe that there's no value to be had here, which I think is a stretch, right? So now we see this and we're a little more worried, right? It's like now McKinsey's saying it, Gartner is coming out with forecasts about it. Is our space safe? Are we going to need to find new careers in the next few years? And so our take at Seer was that uh, the answer is no. I think there is still going to be a really big place for agencies, for creative professionals, and folks who can use AI and combine it with this domain expertise that we have developed and we have earned over the last decade, right? So this was our take. This was our messaging to clients and our team in January of 2024. We said, look, we're not going to follow the path. We are going to blaze the trail. And Seer certainly is not alone. There are a lot of really smart agencies and really, really smart consultants who are trying to forge ahead here and say, okay, how do we leverage this? How do we continue to offer value and services to clients in this space by using AI and not let AI replace us? By far the most important thing, in my opinion, that we did at Seer is create an AI council. So I lead this AI council. I'm supported by Lauren Convis, who works within our business strategy team, specifically focuses on operations within that team, and Jordan Strauss, who's kind of a jack of all trades. He's an SEO, but he's also an analyst. He spent time on our analytics team, and he leads our R&D group. So together we were able to say, okay, let's kick off the year and figure out what we need to do, what investments we need to make, what do we need to test, what do we need to see in order to get this technology in the hands of the team. And so that was back in January, right? And now here we are in November, several months later. What have we done? I wanted to start with what we have accomplished. And what I'll say is that this was such a foundational year, and I'm very excited for what's to come in 2025 and 2026. But I think we've really laid a very good groundwork. So here's some of the key results. First of all, nearly half of our clients at Seer have opted into our ability to use non-public data, their non-public data within AI platforms. We now have 4 total team members with at least 25% dedication to our AI council. I think this is really important. It's easy to say, hey, I've got tons of smart people at my agency. Everybody should be using AI and figuring out how we implement it within our workflows. That's easier said than done. And when nobody is accountable, that means nobody is responsible for making things happen. So, with the support of the AI Council and, of course, our top down leadership, we've been able to achieve, depending on what division you work within at Seer, either a 5% through a 17% AI integration of AI within our workflows and deliverables at Seer. And keep in mind, we've only been at this for 11 months, and a lot of our focus was not so much on R&D, but it was on setting the stage and building the foundation for what was to come. The team at Seer has been really happy with what we've been doing. We just got our workplace experience scores back, and we saw across the board one of the highlights was the support, the learning and development, and the access to tools that we've been offering the team. We all know a happy team is a productive team, is a team that is more likely to go the extra mile for our clients and create a great client experience. So our workplace experience score is really important to us. We've also developed over 40 custom GPTs for both our clients and internal use. And we were really inspired by a case study that OpenAI and Moderna released many months ago, where they basically tried to enable their entire organization to access AI through the lens of custom GPTs. It's a really good gateway to say, okay, let's start to dabble in this new tool and let's start to insert it into your workflows and into different steps you're already taking as part of your day-to-day. So that was an approach that we took that we're really happy with. Our client retention, and of course, there's many things that go into this. We have an incredible team, we have incredible clients, but our client retention, we have been so proud of this year at nearly 95%, up almost 10% year over year. And I do think a big part of that is brands are worried, right? Brands are concerned about what the future holds. And we have been very vocal about saying, hey, we've got your back. Here's the research we're doing. Here's what we know. More importantly, here's what we don't know. We are not afraid to tell our clients, hey, we are not sure how to optimize for generative engines yet, but here are the steps we're taking to figure that out. I think we have built a lot of trust with our clients because of that approach. We've also got over 90% compliance on our AI trainings. If anybody leads learning and development with a big team, that's an accomplishment, right? So we've got people not only happy with the learning and development we're offering, but they're engaging with it, they're compliant with it. And across the board, we're seeing a 10% average time savings per AI integration. Now, you should note that right now that time savings is offset by what we're asking the team to do with learning and development. In other words, maybe they're saving a couple of hours on their day-to-day work, but then they're reinvesting those few hours on learning more about AI. We expect in 2025 to start to really see the gains here. So at the highest level, here's what we're going to get into today. How did Seer embrace AI by building on a foundation of data and culture of innovation? So I'm going to talk about 4 investments we made before we even had an AI council that just happened to set us up for success really nicely. I'm going to talk about 4 investments that we made as part of our AI council work in 2024. I'm going to talk about 3 base level GPTs because this is a really interesting and tactical way you can start to integrate AI into your teams and into your agencies. And then lastly, I'll talk about some of the investments that we're looking to make in 2025. So if anybody has spent any time on LinkedIn, all we want to talk about there is AI. And it's this really like sci-fi technical space, right? Like this is a scene from the movie Blade Runner. We're in the future. And if you listen to people who are vocal about AI on LinkedIn, it's all about prompt engineering. It's about generating synthetic data. It's about AI agents and agentic solutions and zero shot versus chain of thought and chain of command. There's all these very technical innovations. They're all real, they're all exciting. But in my experience, where we need to focus to build the foundation looks a lot more like Office Space than it does Blade Runner, because it's a lot of kind of boring things that you've got to invest in. So you've got to capture your knowledge. And that can happen through SOPs or documenting your process, not just documenting the process, but also how are you deciding what decisions to make within your workflows? What are those moments where your team is using their domain expertise and you don't really have that hard coded in any kind of documentation? These are the things that are going to really make AI sing. And so these are the investments we need to be making now. Data hygiene is another one. It's not very fun, but how clean is your data? How well organized is your data? Because a key opportunity with all things AI is to enable more out of the data you have. But if your data is dirty, it's not going to work as well. And then things like skill gap analysis and use case prioritization. You want to understand where your team is at, what they're doing, and how you can meet them where they are. So here are the 4 bets we made in 2023 that I think paid off really, really nicely for us. First of all, we developed that agency-wide task management consistency, and I'm going to get into this more. But in the past, we have a lot of divisions at Seer. We've got SEO, we've got paid, we've got analytics. Everybody kind of had their own way of doing things or their own project management software in some cases. So we said, no, we've got to have one agency-wide solution for this to be consistent. Number 2, really sorry to all my friends at agencies because I know it's not fun, but time tracking is so critical to this. You can't say, hey, we want to make these investments. They're going to save us time if you can't accurately measure that time. Luckily, this is something we had invested in and got really serious about in 2023. So the data we now have in 2024, it's really useful to use. Number 3, we rekindled the culture of innovation and hypothesizing. So again, if you know Will, this is his bread and butter. This is what he does all day. But as an agency grows, there's always that shift between innovation and efficiency. And I think we had swung a little too far towards efficiency over the past few years. And in 2023, we said, okay, let's get back to our roots. Let's get the team excited about innovation and building new solutions. And then number 4, back in 2023, this time last year, actually, we were creating an AI policy that was focused on safety and flexibility. Keyword there is flexibility. So let me get into these one by one. Consistent resource management system. What we use at Seer is Rike. You don't have to use Rike. There's certainly some downfalls of Rike, but what we really like about it is that if you have a very bespoke, unique process, and everybody needs something a little different, and you really want to meet the team where they are, then Reich is a really good solution. It's very easily customizable. The configuration options are seemingly endless, and it's something that can work for the full team. So what we did in 2023 was create something called Blueprints, which is native within Reich for all tasks, because we wanted to ensure consistency. Things like keyword research. How Johnny does keyword research might be a little different than how Susie does keyword research. And what does that mean for Stacy, who joins the team and is working with both Johnny and Susie? So we needed to be able to have some level of consistency in our approach. The other really important factor in all of this is in 2022, we brought on Jacob Bodner, who is our director of agency operations. So we have one person who's kind of overseeing the entire umbrella of all of these needs. That's a really critical piece to why we have been successful here. Number two, commitment to time tracking. Again, I'm sorry to my agency friends, but this is really, really important. And so we did a few things to get consistency here. We've always tracked time at Seer. I've been with Seer since 2012. Time tracking has always been something we do, but we've had varying levels of accountability. In other words, there weren't always a lot of people looking at the data and confirming 100% of the team was tracking their time appropriately. So in 2023, we changed that. We made it as easy as possible for the team. We made sure that the way we were collecting data was going to be able to answer critical questions we had. Because if at the end of the day, people are submitting their timesheets, but we can't really glean any insights from that information, then what's the point of it? We were also really clear about a timeline for change. We said, hey, we know this is going to be a change in your day to day. Humans do not do well with change, and we get that. So we were very clear with the timeline of, hey, we're going to have this 4-week buffer period. We're going to get through the buffer period, and then we're going to have accountability. And then there's going to be consequences for failure to comply. Again, we're not in that Blade Runner world, right? This is very much like the office space world, but these are very important fundamental investments we made to set us up for success. Number three, culture of innovation. This is really, really important, I think. First of all, the concept of efficiency versus innovation is a really interesting one. These two things will always be at odds. They're always going to be on opposite sides of the spectrum. And great leadership, in my opinion, really focuses on creating the right balance between them, depending on where the industry is, where the team is, where they are as a business, where the market is. One part of this that I think is really important, we use Slack. Many of you probably use Slack as our asynchronous communication technology. So what we focused on here is creating spaces for the team. So we have a channel for all things AI, where people are sharing news and people are sharing ideas. We also have a channel for innovation for our opted-in clients. So any clients who allow us to use AI with their non-public data, we're talking about that in a Slack channel. We're saying, hey, we tried this for this client. It worked really well. And then other people are seeing that and understanding how they can do similar testing on their accounts. Another thing we did is hard code innovation into our role expectations, because if it's an expectation, then it should be part of somebody's performance review. It should be part of somebody's expectations within their day-to-day. And then lastly, we have to acknowledge that when we are more focused on innovation, we are going to be less profitable as an agency. When we're more focused on efficiency, we are going to be more profitable. In my opinion, this is a time to be less profitable. This is a time to really focus and double down on innovation, figure out what works, what doesn't, and how you can individually add the most value to your team and your clients. And so saying, hey, 2024, 2025, we're not going to hit the net profit that we normally do. That's going to be okay, because we believe it's going to help us really take off in 2026. Lastly, we set up our AI policy with a lot of flexibility. And this was really largely inspired by the Marketing Artificial Intelligence Institute, a really great resource. They have a great weekly podcast, a great weekly newsletter that really kind of synthesizes a lot of news that has a lot to do with us in marketing, but also the intersection of how AI is changing that. And so we met with many different legal counsels. lawyers aren't sure yet what the space looks like. And so it's a really interesting space. You have to be really intentional and really clear with what you're willing to do and not willing to do. And so one thing we did that I thought was really interesting and valuable is we didn't hard code into our PSA what specific data sources we're going to be using or what specific AI platforms that we'd be using. We said, look, we don't want to hold you back. Right now, we're using ChatGPT for Teams. Next month, Gemini could be the absolute best technology for us, or Claude, or some combination of all of the above. At our core, we want to make sure that we're working with technology that does not train on the data we input. And so they need to have some kind of paid premium model for us to be okay with working with them. Likewise, with specific data sources, we don't want different clients to be okay with different levels of data sources. In other words, imagine you're an account manager at Seer and you have 5 different clients. What we were afraid of is that person's 5 different clients would have 5 different rules about what type of data we can apply AI to. That sounds really confusing for the team member, and that like we're creating an opportunity for that team member to mess up for our clients. We wanted to avoid that. And so we said, look, this is going to be a take it or leave it approach. If you are open to us using AI with your non-public data in ways that we guarantee, as much as somebody can guarantee, are going to be safe, then let's do it. Sign on. If you're uncomfortable with it, or if based on your internal policies, you just can't sign on, that's okay. Let's revisit it. Okay. But let's not be in this gray area that ultimately is just going to create risk for your data. So with all of those investments, we get into 2024, we're like, all right, I'm feeling pretty good about all of this. So here are the bets we made that look really promising. First of all, dedicated time for an AI council. This is kind of rare for us to do at Seer, in large part because we're not a venture-backed agency. We're a bootstrapped agency. This is an agency that Will started uh, over 20 years ago and has never taken a dime from investors. And so every penny we make at Seer, we try to be really, really intentional about. And I'm sure a lot of you are in a similar position. And so the idea of having full-time employees with dedicated time that is not dedicated to specific client responsibility and revenue, that often makes us a little bit nervous. But we said this is really, really important. We need to have people who are accountable to this change. And that's what we did with the AI Council. We also created a custom learning and development program for the SEER team. As we kicked this off, we're like, look, there's so many ways people can be learning about this stuff independently. There are so many resources, podcasts, newsletters. Open up LinkedIn, and there's really interesting stuff there all the time. But we can't expect the team to manage that themselves. We have about 200 people on the SEER team, and we want to make sure if there are things we want them to know, we are putting those things in front of the team. Number 3, I personally have presented dozens of what we call AI roadshows to our clients to solicit opt-ins. Again, the theme here is we want to meet people where they are. Every client has a different level of comfort or excitement about AI. We wanted as many clients as possible to be willing to work with us and allow us to integrate AI into their project, but we wanted to do it in a way where we all felt really confident in the approach. Lastly, we did what's called a disruption analysis and created base level GPTs. That I think is a really important tactical takeaway from our time together today. So we'll get into that in detail. All right, I'm going to start to breeze through these because I do want to make sure we've got some time for questions. I talked about this. We created an AI council. Most important thing here, when everyone is responsible, no one is accountable. Everybody has at least 25%, in most cases, 50% dedication to other divisions. So they stay in the weeds with clients. I still oversee SEO as a division with half of my time. But with the other half of my time, I'm focused on how AI can add value to that division. Number 2, a custom learning and development program for the SEER team. This is a big investment we made in Q2 and Q3. It took a lot of time, but again, we met our team where they were. We balanced it. There was some fun and there was some practical learning. We said, look, just give us an hour of every week. We know we've got billability and productivity targets. to hit. We know everybody's busy. We've had a very good year in terms of business at Seer. So everybody is really busy with client work. But if you give us 1 hour a week, I promise it's going to be worth it. So I talked about the AI roadshows we conducted for clients. Each roadshow was a really customized journey that brought clients into the heart of our vision. And what we found is even if a client couldn't opt in, they fully understood what we were doing. And it opened up the door to have the conversation later on and say, hey, let's revisit this in 2025 when our team has a more formal policy together. A lot of our clients are standing up AI councils and making folks accountable. So we've opened the door really nicely in a lot of instances. This is a really important one I want to focus on. We did a disruption analysis. Again, this was inspired by a Moderna and OpenAI case study. If you want to read more about that, just Google Moderna and OpenAI. At Seer, we found we had over 170 different deliverables and workflows across all of our divisions, all the things we do that we charge clients for, basically. We scored all of those items based on disruptability. So how much or how little can AI fit within that workflow? We rated them based on business priority. We aggregated the time spent on these in the last year. Again, we wouldn't have been able to do that if we didn't have consistent resource management and consistent time tracking. We also rated them by relative complexity and client value. Here's a QR code so you can scan this. We have a very in-depth blog post I created on the Seer website that basically summed up the process of our disruption analysis and also a lot of our findings from that disruption analysis. And what we found is here's some of the most consistent things we do across the board at Seer. We do a lot of reviews and revisions. We check each other's work. We want to make sure that our clients are getting the best possible experience. We create a lot of presentations. We manipulate a lot of data. We're cleaning it, we're organizing it, we're categorizing it. We do a lot of analysis. And we create a lot of insights and recommendations based on that analysis that often needs to be prioritized against other initiatives. So, given all of that, we're trying to think how do we get AI into the hands of our team as a whole as easily as possible in ways that it's going to fit into their workflows. So we created 3 base level GPTs, a slide deck outline GPT. The problem this solves is that presentations are very time consuming to create. This is something that ChatGPT does really well right now with the right instructions. So we can have our team use natural language to say, hey, here's my situation with the client. Here are the opportunities. Here are the objections. Help me put together the narrative flow. Number 2, a project brief GPT. I'm sure all of us are familiar with project briefs. The basic idea is before you get started on an in-depth analysis or deliverable, let's make sure our expectations with the client are aligned. And we're going to create something that is going to meet or exceed their expectations. So we can do that more consistently now. Lastly, meeting recapper GPT. This sounds like a boring one, but this is low-key one of the most exciting ones we've built this year. The idea is if you work with an agency, you know agency transitions can suck. Point blank, right? So you might work with an account manager for years, and then that account manager moves on to a different opportunity. You get a new account manager, he or she is fine, but they don't know all the nuance and the context that old account manager knew. This is a problem at every agency in the world. ChatGPT and generative AI can create a solution for this. So what we do now is we record all client calls where clients are allowing that. So we have a transcript documented from all of the calls. You can submit that transcript to the meeting recapper GPT, and it's going to pull out those insights that are like, hey, this is a really important thing that we learned from the client. Let's make sure this is hard coded in our knowledge management system. So if you win the lottery as the account manager and you leave tomorrow, all of these insights you have that live in your head about the client are going to be stored. All right, now I want to look ahead to 2025, and I want to leave a little time for Q&A as well. So here's what we're looking at in 2025. Even more documentation of standard operating procedure. When I kicked off 2024, I said we are in such a good spot here because we spent so much time designing those blueprints within Reich. What we quickly realized is so much of our process lives in our heads. And what I mean by that is, imagine if you're an SEO and you're trying to optimize for a specific keyword. You might Google the keyword and you might look at the SERP, and there's all these internal calculations you're doing based on the tools that you have set up, but also just your experience. Maybe you see a competitor and you're like, okay, that's a good sign. You see an affiliate, you're like, that's not a great sign. Their authority is really high. We didn't have all those insights documented. The act of documenting those insights is absolutely critical if you want to embrace this AI agent future. If you don't have your standard operating procedures documented, you are not going to be successful in agentic solutions. We are also really excited about how we can integrate AI with our data platform. So at Seer, we have a data platform called Seer Signals. We believe that it's a really valuable tool because it combines different data sets in interesting ways. The main being that we can look at paid data next to organic search data and identify opportunities. So naturally, we are very excited about the idea of integrating AI within that data platform. Really what we're waiting on is the technology to keep up and the technology to be built into some of these tools like Looker that we use. We're also really excited about the idea of exploring model agnostic R&D. We've been on ChatGPT all year. ChatGPT is awesome, but so is Claude. And for some things, so is Gemini. We don't want to have to pay for every single model for every single team member at Seer. And so there's more and more options for the team to basically interface with one UI and be able to access different models depending on what use case. Even better, the team doesn't even think about what models to access. All of that is innately built within the technology. Early days there, but a very exciting path forward. And then lastly, everybody's talking about AI agents, right? Agentic solutions are so exciting, and I do believe they're going to be transformative. I can't underscore enough, though, that if you're not documenting the things you do in great detail, including what decisions you're making and how you are making those decisions, your agentic solutions are not going to be special. They're not going to be unique. They're not going to add value to your clients. So here's my 4 key takeaways. If you want to successfully integrate AI into your organization, appoint an AI council. This is really important. Give folks dedicated time, make somebody accountable. Number 2, conduct a disruption analysis. Identify the most meaningful opportunities and prioritize them. Something I didn't yet touch on, but you'll see in the blog post, what we didn't want to do is say, hey, we do 170 things at Seer, so let's change 170 things for the team. That doesn't make sense, right? That is a very, very poor experience for the team to have to keep up with that volume of changes. That's why we went in the direction of these base level GPTs, said, hey, let's learn a few things and have them impact many deliverables. Invest in learning and development. Yes, people can learn for free. There's so much knowledge available online. You can't expect your team to rely on that. You have to control the messaging for your entire organization. If there are things you want your team to know, you need to be able to put those things in front of your team. Lastly, prioritize the role of agency operations. At least for us at Seer, this was a tough decision. It took us probably too long to make this decision. We just thought, well, there's so many other things we can do with that budget. Do we really need this? The answer is yes, you really need it, and it's going to enable all of the things above. All right, that's everything I have, and I think we have about 10 minutes left for questions if we can get into that.
Hi again, Alisa. Thank you so much for the great presentation and for all the insight that you already use in Seer. And I'm really looking forward to this presentation because as we are the marketing team of SEO, we have something to learn in this presentation. And thank you again so much.
Yeah.
By the way, we have 3 questions already. And if any of our attendees want to ask any questions, just you can use the button in the right-hand side, the Q&A button, then you can just post your question. And let me show the first question on the stage. Can you see it?
Yeah, I can.
Perfect.
Okay, great. Let me get out of here. All right, so what project management tools do we use to coordinate AI integration? Really, the biggest is Reich. So again, Reich, I mean, the biggest knock against it is it can at times be a bit slow, but they're very forward thinking. They're very easily customizable, and the configuration options are really, really helpful. So I know another option we considered was Notion, maybe for smaller teams that could work, but our biggest flaw that we identified there is just the ability to really hard code blueprints and processes and task management, combine that also with resource management, combine it also with time tracking so everything is in one tool. That was a little bit lacking with everything else we looked at.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
And next question is, when integrating AI into a marketing team's workflow, what are the key skills or roles that marketers should develop or bring into the team to maximize the effectiveness of the tools?
In my opinion, we as SEOs are one of the best suited career paths to embrace AI because so little has been handed to us, right? There's not a lot of really good documentation or resources for how do you do exactly what you need to do for clients. And we know SEO, depending on if you're in e-commerce or B2B or where you're focused nationally or globally, it's a different flavor every time. And so SEOs have had to be really resourceful in testing our own ideas and hypotheses and trying to understand best practices and what Google and other platforms are saying, but also balance that with our experience. And so what I'm getting at here is the curiosity and the willingness to test, I think, is such an important key skill that is going to set up marketers to be successful. And I'll also give a shout out to a post that Will Reynolds published early in 2024. It is the Marketer's AI Survival Guide, and it goes through 5 levels of AI integration and different steps folks can take for everything from what tools should I be using, how should I be thinking about AI, what should I be reading about, where should I be in order to be successful in this area. So that's a really good tactical guide.
Perfect. It's on the Sears blog, or how can
That's
we?
right, on the Seer website. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And we have the final question is, how do you measure the performance of AI tools in terms of ROI for marketing campaigns?
I think this is something that is going to be very much a case by case basis. And you want to always start with a hypothesis. So, a lot of the times, what we're inevitably doing with AI tools is trying to figure out how to do something more efficiently. And so, what you want to be able to measure is okay, how much time does it take me to do something without AI? How much time does it take me to do something with AI? And how am I measuring the output? Is there some kind of acceptance criteria to say, yes, I got the same quality or even better quality? And then to that end, sometimes we're using these tools not necessarily to save time. Maybe it's adding steps or adding time, but we believe that the end result is going to be even better. So I think there's no standard way to do this. Whatever you're trying to invest in or test, you've got to think really critically about what are the metrics I'm going to look at to understand if this was successful or not, and do I have a benchmark of those metrics to measure against.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much for the detailed answers. And I guess these are all the questions we have for now. But I believe if people have any questions in their mind, they can just type you on Twitter or LinkedIn, I guess, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, reach out to me on any of those platforms would be great.
Perfect. Thank you so much again for your time, for being with us. It means a lot to us, actually, and hope to see you in another Digital Zone event.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.